November 7, 1943. Low clouds press down over northern France. The air smells of burned cordite and wet soil. Below that gray blanket, a single Republic P-47D2RA Thunderbolt fights its way west toward England. Pilot 2nd Lieutenant William E. Roach, 358th Fighter Squadron, 355th Fighter Group. He has been escorting B-17s home from a bombing raid on the Ruhr. Now his fuel gauges tremble on empty and the engine, the vast 2,000 horsepower Pratt & Whitney R2800 Double Wasp, growls unevenly at low boost. The jug, as they call it, is heavy with steel and armor. 8.50 caliber Brownings, 305 gallons of high-octane 100-130 fuel, and the pride of American industry crammed into 11 tons of aluminum. At altitude, this brute can outrun anything the Luftwaffe sends. Down here in cloud and drizzle, it's a trapped animal. The radio hisses, dead. Compass unreliable. Fuel gone. Roach glances once more at the manifold pressure gauge, the last sign of life from the Double Wasp. It flickers, then falls. He has seconds to decide. Bail out into German-held countryside or try to land. Below, a faint strip of lighter ground appears through fog. Flat, straight, bordered by pine. He pushes the stick forward, drops flaps, lowers the landing gear and whispers, "Please hold together." The wheels touch. The jug slams down, bounces once, then skids across wet turf. When it stops, the propeller bends against the mud and the cockpit fills with silence. Relief lasts only a breath. Through the haze, figures run toward him. Men in field gray coats with Mausers slung across their shoulders. Roach's heart sinks. He has landed on an operational Luftwaffe airfield near St. Omer, less than 20 miles from the channel. He unstraps and steps out, hands raised. The Germans surround the Thunderbolt, rifles lowered but eyes wide. The plane towers above them, absurdly large next to their slim Messerschmitt Bf 109GS parked nearby. One mechanic laughs and slaps the fuselage. Die Fliegen Milch Flash. The flying milk bottle. Another circles the nose. Why build a fighter this fat? The laughter fades as they notice the armor thickness, the complex ductwork under the fuselage, the size of the propeller hub. Nothing about it matches their understanding of fighter design. A senior officer, Oberleutnant Karl Neumann, arrives, clipboard in hand. He inspects the wrecked propeller, then peers inside the cockpit. The instruments are immaculate, dozens of dials labeled in neat English script. The gun sight glows faintly red from the battery still running. He turns to his men. "Handle it carefully," he orders. "This machine is worth more than any prisoner." Within an hour, photographers arrive to document the find. Mechanics remove ammunition belts, each cartridge gleaming brass, and drain the remaining fuel into glass flasks for analysis. The smell fills the hangar, sweet, strong, unlike the 87-octane gasoline they use. Someone notes that even their best Daimler-Benz engines would detonate on such fuel. That night, the airfield commander receives coded instructions from Berlin. The Americans' newest high-altitude fighter is to be sent intact to the Erprobungsstelle Recklen, the Luftwaffe's central test and evaluation center north of Berlin. Their engineers will dismantle and study it bolt by bolt. Before dawn, a transport crew begins the operation. They unbolt the wings, lash the fuselage to a flatbed truck, and cover it with canvas. 2 motorcycles lead the convoy east. Soldiers at each checkpoint step aside to let the strange cargo pass. A captured monster rolling through occupied France like a mechanical trophy. At a roadside stop near Cambrai, curious villagers watch silently. To them, the sight carries a strange hope. If the Americans can build machines like this, perhaps liberation is not far away. Inside the truck cab, a Luftwaffe mechanic keeps glancing at the tarpaulin in the mirror. Even hidden, the jug's bulk fills the trailer. He shakes his head. Too heavy. It shouldn't fly. His companion, an engineer from Recklen, replies quietly, "Yet it does, higher and faster than ours." They travel through Belgium, across the Rhine, and into Mecklenburg. By the time they reach the test center, word of the Thunderbolt's capture has spread. Pilots, metallurgists, and officers gather at the gate to see it unloaded. As the covers are pulled back, the aircraft gleams under the winter sun, battered yet magnificent. The red, white, blue roundels have been hastily painted over with black crosses, but the Americans' craftsmanship remains unmistakable. One of the German pilots whistles softly. "Look at it," he says. "Like a locomotive with wings." Neumann stands beside him. "Perhaps," he answers, "and maybe that is exactly what wins wars." Later that evening, the Thunderbolt is towed into Hangar 17 for inspection. The mechanics switch off the lights, leaving the huge silhouette resting in the dark, a steel giant sleeping among its captors. No one there knows it yet, but the machine they just captured will soon teach them a truth far more devastating than any bombing raid, that the war's outcome will not be decided in the skies, but in the factories that built machines like this one by the thousands. November 10, 1943. After 3 days on the road, the convoy from St. Omer rumbles through the gates of Erprobungstel-Rechlin, Germany's top-secret Luftwaffe test and evaluation center. The winter sun hangs low over the frozen fields. Beyond the wire fences stand hangars filled with the captured dreams of other nations. A Spitfire here, a Yak-9 there, a battered B-24 stripped of insignia. But nothing draws more attention than the huge, tarped mass rolling off the truck that morning. When the canvas comes away, the German technicians stop talking. Before them stands the Republic P-47D Thunderbolt, the latest American fighter, still streaked with French mud and smelling faintly of burned 100-octane gasoline. Even after the long journey, the machine's presence dominates the hangar. Its fuselage rises chest-high to a man. Its wings stretch 40 feet across, thick and purposeful. To pilots raised on the slim shapes of Messerschmitts and Focke-Wulfs, this is a monster. Oberleutnant Karl Neumann, chief engineer of the captured aircraft section, circles it slowly with his clipboard. He notes the serial number 42 to 8067, the Curtiss electric propeller hub, the layers of protective paint along the leading edges. Every detail seems overbuilt. Everything about the aircraft shouts power, endurance, and the luxury of abundant material. "This isn't a fighter," mutters one of his mechanics. "It's a flying tank." Neumann answers quietly, "And it is tanks that win wars." They push the Thunderbolt into Hangar 12, a cathedral of steel and glass where test pilots and engineers work side by side. Overhead cranes hum as they lift the massive engine cowling. Each movement requires 3 men. The Germans are used to nimble aircraft that 1 or 2 mechanics can service. This machine feels industrial, something forged, not crafted. When the lights come on, the hangar fills with reflection. Silver panels, black rubber tires, yellow inspection markings, English stencils still visible under grime. On the floor around it, the airmen of Rechlin gather. Pilots from the Luftwaffe test group, engineers from BMW and Junkers, even metallurgists from Krupp. They are the elite minds of German aviation, drawn together to understand how this foreign brute manages to outclimb and outfight them at high altitude. One pilot laughs. "Look at the size of it. Perhaps the Americans build their fighters to survive a crash rather than win a dogfight." The remark draws smiles, but Neumann doesn't join in. "Mock it later," he says. "First, learn why it frightens our pilots." They begin with external measurements. Wingspan, 40 feet, 9 inches. Length, 36 feet, 1 inch. Weight, nearly 8 tons fully loaded, double that of a Bf-109G. The sheer mass astonishes everyone. To keep something so heavy airborne, they realize, it must produce more power than any German single-engine aircraft in service. That means its engine, hidden under the broad cowling, holds the real secret. But before they unbolt it, Neumann insists on a full walk-around. He points out features that stand out immediately: the self-sealing fuel tanks, the thick bulletproof glass, the radio compartment shielded against interference. The landing gear retracts outward into the wings, long and sturdy, built to handle the weight of a fully armed aircraft on rough airstrips. Even the tail wheel is reinforced. Everything suggests a machine designed to endure punishment and still fly home. They examine the cockpit next. Inside, the layout surprises them: logical, uncluttered, every switch labeled clearly in English. German cockpits, dense with dials and circuit breakers, assume an expert pilot. The Thunderbolt assumes a soldier. It is designed for speed of training, for quantity, for men who might have a few dozen hours of flight time before combat. A pilot's office, Neumann murmurs, but built by a factory foreman. When they roll the canopy forward, the room grows quiet. Unlike the framed hoods of their FW-190s, this one is a single, curved bubble, crystal clear. The test pilot, Hauptmann Hans-Werner Lurk, studies it with a half-smile. You could see everything from up here. No blind spots. No surprise attacks. He glances at Neumann. They're thinking not of performance, but survival. That evening, Neumann writes his first report to Berlin. His words are measured but carry weight. The American Thunderbolt represents a new philosophy of design. It is not graceful, yet it is functional to the extreme. Strength and simplicity have replaced art. It is a machine conceived not by aces but by engineers. Outside the hangar, the night deepens. Frost coats the runway. Mechanics drape canvas over the jug and secure it for the morning. Inside, Newman remains at his desk, sketching the faint outline of the fuselage and the enormous radial engine within it. He notes the serial stamps on each panel, factory identifiers from Evansville, Farmingdale, and Bridgeport. This single machine, he realizes, is not the product of one factory. It is the child of an entire continent's industry. He writes one final line before putting down his pencil. If they can build thousands of these, we will lose the war long before we run out of courage. The lamp flickers. The hangar falls silent except for the ticking of cooling metal. The captured Thunderbolt rests in darkness, but its presence has already begun to unsettle the men who study it. In 2 days they will strip away the cowling and uncover the engine that makes it possible, the heart of America's industrial power. Morning frost glitters on the tarmac at Recklin. The P-47 sits at the center of Hangar 12, surrounded by floodlights and engineers in gray overalls. Its massive radial engine dominates the space, a perfect circle of polished steel and copper tubing, still streaked with oil from its last flight over France. One of the technicians laughs under his breath. ESC WWII Milchflash die can. A milk bottle that somehow learned to fly. The nickname sticks. By noon the whole hangar is calling it Die Fliegen Milchflash, the flying milk bottle. But the laughter fades quickly once the inspection begins. The Germans remove the engine cowling. Beneath it lies an intricate labyrinth of pipes, ducts, and intercoolers feeding the Pratt & Whitney R2800 double wasp, 18 cylinders arranged in 2 perfect rows. Every bolt is tight, every joint clean. There are no gaskets between the crankcase halves. Instead, the surfaces are so precisely machined that they seal themselves under pressure. One engineer runs his finger along the joint and mutters, "Unmöglich, no sealant?" Newman leans in. Impossible or not, it doesn't leak. They disassemble further, noting the symmetry of the twin-row cylinder banks, the accessibility of spark plugs and magnetos, the robustness of the connecting rods. This engine, they realize, is not a prototype built by hand, it is a mass-produced masterpiece. Thousands of identical double wasps are leaving American factories every month, all cut with this same precision. On a bench nearby, a mechanic lays out one of the pistons recovered from the cylinder block. It's larger than a man's fist and weighs nearly 2 kilograms. 18 of these, he whispers, and still it climbs like a rocket. Lurk, the test pilot, studies the intake system. The P-47's secret, he notices, lies in the turbo-supercharger buried deep in its belly, a complex, gear-driven compressor fed by long exhaust pipes that glow red under full power. German aircraft use superchargers mounted directly to the engine. None employ a separated system like this. He sketches the layout, air entering through the nose intake routed under the cockpit to the turbine, then forced back to the engine through a silver duct. The Germans have never seen anything like it. The distance between turbine and cylinders seems absurd, yet it works, delivering full power at 30,000 feet. A BMW representative, brought in to compare designs, shakes his head. With our alloys and fuel, such heat would melt the pipes. Newman answers, then the Americans have solved the metallurgy too. When the inspection pauses for lunch, conversation drifts among the engineers. Too heavy, says one. No German pilot would fly such a brute. Perhaps, replies another, but he'd live longer. Lurk looks up from his notes. This thing is not built for elegance. It's built to win through endurance. They examine the armor plating next, 2 centimeters thick around the cockpit, and a bullet-resistant windscreen of laminated glass. The fuel tanks are wrapped in layers of rubberized fabric that swell when pierced, sealing holes instantly, a self-sealing system far superior to anything in current Luftwaffe fighters. At the tail, they study the control cables and the robust tailwheel assembly. Even the landing gear shocks are over-engineered, designed to handle rough fields and hard landings. One engineer remarks that it could likely belly land and still be reparable. Newman notes it all carefully in his report to the Reich Air Ministry. The Thunderbolt represents a total shift in aviation philosophy. Where we refine, they reinforce. Where we conserve, they produce. It is inefficient, yet unstoppable. He adds another line in pencil at the bottom. A nation that can build 10 of these for every one of ours does not need finesse, only time. Late in the afternoon, Lurk climbs into the cockpit for familiarization. The canopy slides forward smoothly. Inside, he is struck by the simplicity. Throttle, mixture, prop controls, all color-coded and arranged logically. No maze of switches. Even the emergency release levers are marked with bright red guards. He compares it silently to his FW-190A5, where every adjustment requires a pilot's instinct. This cockpit, by contrast, teaches its pilot while he flies. It feels almost American, confident that any man can master the machine with enough training and repetition. He flips a switch, the radio crackles to life. The clarity astonishes the German technicians, far cleaner than their FUG 16 systems. One turns the dials, realizing the frequency markings use both kilocycles and megacycles, standardization across Allied aircraft. They are fighting not just a country, but an industry aligned in perfect coordination. That night, Newman and Lurk sit together in the mess hall. The younger man stares into his coffee. How do you defeat a nation that builds airplanes like tractors? Newman answers quietly, you don't. You endure until you can't. Outside, snow begins to fall. The captured Thunderbolt rests again in the hangar, its skin now marked with the black cross of the Luftwaffe. Tomorrow it will fly again, under new colors but powered by the same unyielding heart. November 13, 1943. A pale sun rises over Lake Müritz, its reflection shimmering on the frozen surface beside Rechlin Airfield. Mechanics bustle around the captured Thunderbolt, now repainted in Luftwaffe markings, black crosses on its silver wings, a yellow band circling the fuselage. The men move cautiously as if servicing a creature they don't quite understand. At 8:30, Hauptmann Hans Werner Lurk, the Luftwaffe's most experienced test pilot of captured Allied aircraft, climbs the ladder and settles into the American cockpit. The smell inside is familiar, oil, rubber, and the faint sweetness of high-octane fuel. But everything else feels foreign. The instruments are labeled in English. The throttle quadrant is reversed. The altimeter reads in feet, not meters. He checks the notes taped to the panel, translation scrawled hastily by engineers overnight, boost equals Leidruck. Man press equals Leidruckens each. Mixture, auto-rich/auto lean. He straps in, tugs the harness tight and gives the signal. Startup. The mechanic primes the engine. The massive Pratt & Whitney R2800 coughs once, twice, then roars to life with a sound unlike anything the Germans have ever heard. A rolling, thunderous growl fills the hangar, shaking the concrete. Even idling at 1,000 revolutions per minute, the jug's prop wash rattles loose papers across the floor. Lurk watches the gauges climb, oil pressure steady. Manifold pressure 30 inches. Cylinder head temperature in the green. He advances the throttle slightly, and the entire aircraft shudders like a chained animal. Outside, engineers cover their ears. Mein Gott, one shouts. It's a factory on wings. Take off. The runway stretches white and empty ahead. Lurk releases the brakes. The Thunderbolt rolls forward slowly at first, then faster, the four-bladed prop clawing at the air. At 100 km per hour, the tail lifts. At 180, the controls grow light. By 220, the jug is airborne, smooth, steady, heavy. He retracts the landing gear. The long legs fold outward, twisting elegantly into the wings. Climb rate, 4,000 feet per minute. Lurk's first impression, it should not fly this well. He banks gently over the lake. The aircraft responds sluggishly but predictably. The stick feels weighty, deliberate, like steering a locomotive rather than a race car. Yet there is a strange reassurance in its steadiness. He calls down to the tower, Thunderbolt airborne. All systems stable. Continuing climb. High altitude test. At 20,000 feet he levels out. The turbo supercharger comes alive, a faint metallic whine rising behind the cockpit as exhaust gases drive the turbine. The manifold pressure holds constant despite the thinning air. This, Lurk realizes, is the true genius of American engineering, consistent power at altitude. He pushes the throttle to military setting, 52 inches of mercury, 2,700 revolutions per minute. The airspeed indicator climbs past 600 kilometers per hour, then 650. At 9,000 meters, still climbing easily, the Thunderbolt hits nearly 640 kilometers per hour, a speed no German piston fighter can sustain at that height. Lurk is astonished. It feels as though the sky itself is helping it, he later writes. The cockpit remains calm, even warm. The P-47's ventilation and heating systems are far superior to the primitive blowers of German aircraft. His gloved hands rest easily on the controls. No freezing fingers. No fogged canopy. For a pilot used to scraping frost off instruments mid-flight, this is luxury. He tests stability. Rolls steady but slow. Yaw stable. Pitch firm. He dives, throttles back, and feels the aircraft accelerate like a stone dropped from heaven. The altimeter unwinds violently. At 800 kilometers per hour indicated, the control surfaces stiffen, but the jug holds together. No flutter. No vibration. When he pulls out, the wings groan, yet the aircraft recovers without complaint. Lurk laughs aloud inside the cockpit. So this is why they call it a jug, he says to himself. It pours out power until the cup overflows. Landing. Back at Reckland, the airfield shimmers in morning haze. He lowers the flaps, broad, sturdy panels that bite into the air. The jug descends obediently, steady as a bomber. Touchdown speed is high, but the wide gear absorbs it easily. When the propeller stops spinning, the field crew breaks into applause. Even the skeptical engineers can't hide their admiration. Lurk climbs down, his flight suit damp with sweat and excitement. He pulls off his helmet and says quietly, "Gentlemen, this machine is no joke." Post-flight report. That evening he dictates his findings to Newman, who records every word. At low altitude, the Thunderbolt feels sluggish, like moving a heavy cart uphill. But at medium to high altitude it transforms. The turbosupercharger maintains full power long after our engines fade. It climbs effortlessly to 11,000 meters. Speed exceeds 640 kilometers per hour at 9,000 meters. The cockpit comfort, visibility, and engine reliability are unmatched. It is not a sports car. It is a hammer, designed to strike hard and survive. He pauses before continuing. If our pilots meet this machine above 20,000 feet, they must dive away early, not fight it there. At altitude, the jug owns the sky. Newman closes the notebook. The two men sit in silence. Outside, the hangar hums as technicians finish draining fuel samples and photographing the engine bay. The sound of the R-2800 still echoes faintly in their ears, a mechanical thunder that lingers even after the silence returns. That night, Lurk writes in his personal logbook, "I flew the American Thunderbolt today, a flying fortress in miniature. It does not dance, it endures. Its strength lies not in beauty but in abundance. If this is what the Americans mass-produce, then no wonder they keep coming, endless, relentless, unbreakable." He underlines one word twice, power. That same evening, November 13, 1943, the debriefing room at Reckland Test Center is filled to capacity. The air smells of cigarette smoke, coffee, and cold metal, the scent of long hours and tired minds. Charts of airspeed, altitude, and power curves line the walls. On the central table lies a single engine piston from the captured P-47. Its polished crown reflects the ceiling lights, a silent symbol of what the Germans now confront. Oberleutnant Karl Newman stands at the front with Lurk's flight report in hand. Around him sit the elite of the Reich's aviation industry, engineers from BMW, Junkers, and Daimler-Benz, alongside Luftwaffe strategists and senior officers in gray tunics. Lurk begins his presentation calmly. "The aircraft performs adequately at low level," he says, "but once it climbs beyond 6,000 meters, nothing we have can touch it. Its turbosupercharger holds full pressure to over 9,000. It feels unstoppable above the clouds." An engineer from BMW interrupts. "That's not possible. No mechanical compressor can maintain boost that high without seizing." Newman replies, "It's not mechanical, it's exhaust-driven. A separate turbine system. The Americans solved the heat problem with superior alloys and a cooling duct network that we can't reproduce with our current materials." The room murmurs. One man leans forward. "So they have achieved it, reliable exhaust-driven compression?" "Yes," Newman says. "Mass-produced, in thousands of units. That is the true shock." On the chalkboard behind him, he sketches what they found inside the jug's belly, the long, snaking pipes leading from the engine's exhaust to the General Electric turbosupercharger mounted behind the cockpit. "This," he says, tapping the drawing, "is what lets a 4.5-ton aircraft fight like a hawk at 11 kilometers. They did not just build power. They industrialized altitude." He passes around photographs of the Pratt & Whitney R-2800 double wasp assembly, close-ups showing the twin rows of cylinders, precision bolt spacing, and seamless crankcase joints. "There are no gaskets," he says quietly. "None. The metal surfaces are machined so precisely that they seal themselves. The tolerances are beyond anything we can achieve consistently in wartime." A metallurgist from Krupp turns the photo sideways. "You're saying each engine half fits perfectly without adjustment?" Newman nods. "Exactly. And here's the worst part. These engines are being built by half a dozen different companies, and yet they all fit together perfectly. Interchangeable parts. Complete standardization." The realization sinks in. The Americans have not just built a fighter. They have built a system capable of producing thousands of identical fighters. A Luftwaffe colonel slams his fist on the table. "Our Focke-Wulfs can outturn anything they have." Newman meets his glare. Perhaps at 3,000 meters. But this war is now being fought at 30,000. Silence follows. Everyone knows what that means. The high-altitude escort fighters protecting Allied bombers over Germany. Lurk adds, the Jug isn't there to dogfight. It's there to escort and to destroy. Can take a cannon hit and keep flying. I've seen no other single-engine aircraft that can survive so much punishment. He pauses, then says with quiet admiration, I understand now why their pilots love it. It doesn't just fight, it forgives. Newman opens a new page in his report titled, Comparative Analysis. He lists 3 key insights. Power and altitude supremacy. The R2800's 2,000 horsepower, maintained through turbo-supercharging, grants the P-47 unmatched high-altitude performance. German piston engines lose 1/3 of their power above 6,000 meters. Industrial reproducibility. The American machining tolerances and interchangeable parts indicate mass production on a scale beyond Germany's reach under current conditions. Pilot survivability and comfort, heated cockpit, excellent visibility, and logical control layout reduce fatigue and training time, reflecting a system designed for thousands of pilots, not a few aces. When he finishes, he looks around the room. This is not a question of aerodynamics anymore, he says. It is a question of industry. The Americans are not fighting us plane to plane, they are fighting us factory to factory. That night, after the meeting ends, Newman and Lurk step outside into the freezing air. In the distance, the captured P-47 sits beneath floodlights, its aluminum skin gleaming faintly against the snow. Lurk lights a cigarette. What do we tell Berlin? Newman exhales slowly. The truth. That we are already losing a war we didn't know we were fighting. The wind carries the distant rumble of engines from a test flight of a Focke-Wulf nearby. Compared to the Jug's thunder, it sounds almost fragile, the cough of a machine built on dwindling fuel and desperate hands. Newman looks back at the massive American fighter, half-shadowed under the hangar lights. For all our genius, he says quietly, we built art. They built victory. November 15, 1943. The hangar at Reckland smells of hot oil and solvent. Beneath the bright lamps, the P-47 lies open like an anatomy lesson in metal. Panels are removed, wires labeled, every pipe and fitting exposed. German engineers move slowly, reverently around the machine. The deeper they look, the less it resembles anything they know. Oberleutnant Carl Newman stands beside the removed engine cradle, notebook in hand. The Pratt & Whitney R2800 Double Wasp has been fully extracted, resting on a stand like a captured heart. Its 18 cylinders gleam in the light, perfect symmetry, flawless machining. Even to trained eyes, it looks impossibly refined for a wartime product. A senior metallurgist from Krupp, gray-haired and sharp-eyed, examines the cylinder walls through a magnifier. Nickel chromium steel, he murmurs. And these fins, perfectly machined, no casting marks. He shakes his head. They're not building these one by one. They're stamping perfection by the thousand. Newman notes it down, precision equals volume. The turbo-supercharger revelation. 2 technicians wheel over the aircraft's removed rear fuselage panels. Beneath them sits the General Electric turbo-supercharger, a compact turbine the size of a man's torso, mounted midway down the fuselage. Long twin pipes run from the engine exhausts to the turbine's inlets, turning glowing red at full throttle. The German engineers crowd around it in disbelief. Separation of turbine and engine? Absurd, one of the BMW men exclaims. We'd lose too much energy through distance. Newman points at the insulation. Yet they don't. See the plating? Stainless steel lined with heat-resistant alloys. Even the bolts are vented to bleed pressure. They trace the ducting, air intake, compressor, intercooler, return line. Every curve, every weld speaks of deliberate engineering. This isn't experimentation, it's production. Lurk runs a hand along the compressor housing. This alone, he says quietly, is a masterpiece. Another engineer adds, and it's not handmade, look at the serials. Each one numbered for assembly. He's right. Stamped markings read GP47 Turbo, 15342. There are no rough edges, no tool marks. Newman turns to the group. Gentlemen, this is not genius. This is organization. Fuel and fire. On another table sits the Jug's fuel system. Large self-sealing tanks made of layered rubber and fabric, flexible yet tough. When pierced, the inner layers swell on contact with gasoline, sealing the hole within seconds. A Luftwaffe fuel specialist cuts a small square and tests it with solvent. It swells, bubbles, then hardens again. Ingenious, he mutters. This alone saves hundreds of pilots. Nearby, a second engineer studies the fuel lines, thick, braided hoses with quick disconnect couplings, easy to replace in the field. He compares them with the rigid metal tubing of the BF-109 and shakes his head. We're building violins. They're building tractors that sing. The cockpit mindset. Inside the open fuselage, technicians record every switch and cable. The cockpit has become a symbol of American thinking. Simplicity first. Levers painted red for emergencies, yellow for fuel, blue for propeller control. Each instrument clearly labeled, spaced for visibility. Newman observes, this machine assumes the pilot might be tired, wounded, or new, and still survive. One young engineer laughs. Then perhaps they plan for mediocrity. Newman answers coldly. No, they plan for numbers. We have aces. They have armies. Lurk, standing at the wing root, listens silently. He's thinking of the German air cadets, boys barely trained, thrown into combat against waves of thunderbolts. Machines like this make courage irrelevant. The heart of industrial power. By late afternoon, the engineers gather again around the R-2800. Newman asks them a single question. How many man-hours to build this engine in Germany? A Junkers representative answers, at least 2,000 with our tolerances and tooling. Newman flips through his notes. In America, it's less than 600. Multiple factories. Interchangeable parts. Assembly line flow. The silence that follows is heavy. Everyone understands what it means. Not only is the enemy out-engineering them, he's outproducing them by a magnitude that no tactical skill can overcome. They look at the heavy piston lying on the bench, a single component, massive, precise, and mass-produced. Someone whispers, if they can build 1 million of these, then the war is already lost. That night, Newman writes his private assessment. We examine the Thunderbolt's engine today. It is both primitive and perfect, simple in design yet executed with precision far beyond our capacity. The Americans have mastered something we never prioritized, reliability at scale. Their engineers do not seek elegance. They seek certainty. This is not a craftsman's aircraft. It is an industrial statement. He sets down his pen, staring at the darkened airfield beyond the frosted window. From somewhere outside comes the muffled whine of a test engine. A BMW 801 struggling through another night of trials, hungry for rare alloys, its mechanics exhausted. Newman thinks of the R-2800's effortless roar, its perfect balance, its arrogance in the sky. He knows the truth now. Germany cannot build enough precision to win. The engineers have seen the future, and it hums like an American radial engine, unbreakable, endless, and already coming for them. November 18, 1943. A cold fog rolls across the Rechlin tarmac. The P-47 sits motionless in the distance, its silver skin dulled by frost. Inside the briefing room, Newman stands before a new kind of map, not of front lines or divisions but of factories. Each circle marks an American production plant. Evansville, Farmingdale, Bridgeport, East Hartford, Buffalo, Cleveland. Lines connect them like arteries. Together they form something the Luftwaffe had never charted. A war fought not in the sky but in assembly halls and foundries. Gentlemen, Newman begins, you asked how the Americans can afford to lose 10 aircraft and still return with 20 more. This is how. He points to Evansville, Indiana. One plant builds 100 Thunderbolts a month. A murmur rises. Even the senior officers blink in disbelief. He continues, and that is only one line. Republic Aviation coordinates with Curtiss, General Electric, and Pratt & Whitney. Every factory builds parts that fit anywhere. Each engine identical. Each bolt measured to the same standard. It is not aircraft production. It is aviation mass replication. The meaning of scale. On the table lie photos recovered from Allied industrial magazines. Assembly lines filled with women in headscarves and denim overalls, riveting P-47 fuselages under floodlights. A BMW engineer squints at one. Women? Building fighters? Newman nods. Yes. While our workers dig anti-tank ditches, there's build engines by the thousands. He turns to a chart showing output by year. 1941, 1,000 aircraft. 1942, 5,000. 1943, over 15,000. That number, Newman says, is more than the Luftwaffe's total fighter inventory. Someone whispers, we could destroy 10 airfields and not dent them. Newman nods. Exactly. Their weapon is not the airplane, it is capacity. Lurk adds quietly from the corner, and every P-47 that crashes can be replaced before its pilot's wounds even heal. The cost of perfection. He shifts to the German side of the board. Messerschmitt Augsburg, Focke-Wulf Bremen, BMW München. Tiny clusters compared to the sprawling American grid. For every P-47, Newman explains, we build two Bf-109s, but we hand-fit the bolts, test each engine by ear and polish every bearing. We build art pieces. They build machines. He pauses. And art does not win a war of quantity. The engineers sit in grim silence. They know their reality: aluminum shortages, fuel rationing, Allied bombers overhead by day and night. Production lines moved underground, scattered across mountains. Every machine built under candlelight feels like defiance itself. But defiance cannot fill the skies. A shift in perspective. An older officer, his uniform threadbare from years of war, breaks the silence. You speak as though this aircraft has already won. But men still fight wars, not machines. Newman turns, weary but firm. No, Colonel. Men build machines, but machines decide how long men can fight. He gestures toward a dismantled piston on the table. This single piece of metal represents three things: material, precision, and time. The Americans have all three. We have courage and shortage. He opens Lurk's flight report again. At high altitude, he reads aloud, the P-47 climbs without effort. His power remains constant. The pilot is comfortable. He fights from strength, not desperation. He looks up. That is what industry buys you, the ability to fight without desperation. The engineer's realization. As the meeting ends, the younger engineers linger. They are silent, each lost in thought. Some stare at the drawings of the R-2800. Others trace the flow of the supercharger pipes. None speak, but the realization has already set in. Germany's engineers are not failing because of skill. They are failing because they are outnumbered by factories. Outside, the distant thrum of engines echoes from the test runway. The P-47 is being run up again, its deep roar shaking the windows. It sounds less like an airplane and more like an industrial anthem. Raw, confident, endless. Lurk steps beside Newman, watching through the glass. Do you hear that? He asks. It's not the sound of an engine. It's the sound of a nation with no fear of running out. Newman nods slowly. It's what victory sounds like, before it's even earned. Later that night, Newman writes a private note to his wife, one he never sends. Today I saw what our leaders will not admit. We have built brilliant aircraft, yes, but brilliance cannot be multiplied. The Americans have found the formula to multiply power itself. Every bolt in that thunderbolt is a declaration that we are fighting time, not just the enemy. And time is on their side. He sets the pen down and listens to the wind whistle against the hangar walls. Beyond them, the captured jug gleams under searchlights, its round engine cowling catching the reflection of frost and flame. Tomorrow he will have to brief Berlin on his findings, but deep inside he knows there is nothing left to advise. The truth is as heavy as the P-47's engine block. Germany can no longer outbuild what it cannot outfly. November 21, 1943, Berlin, Reich Air Ministry. A gray drizzle falls over the Tiergarten as Oberleutnant Karl Neumann stands before the vast stone facade of the Reichsluftfahrtministerium. His briefcase feels heavier than ever. Inside it lies the complete evaluation of the captured American fighter, the Republic P-47D Thunderbolt. It is more than a technical dossier. It is, in truth, a confession that the war Germany thought it could win through innovation is being lost through production. Inside the ministry's war room, the air smells of tobacco and tension. Charts of Allied bomber losses hang beside maps showing frontline shifts in Italy and the Eastern Front. Around the table sit men in gray uniforms with silver eagles on their collars, Luftwaffe officers, industrial planners, and technical inspectors. At the far end, under the Reich insignia, sits General Feldmarschall Erhard Milch, the man responsible for aircraft procurement across the Reich. Newman begins quietly. Gentlemen, we have completed our study of the American P-47 Thunderbolt captured in France. Its engine, the Pratt & Whitney R-2800, develops 2,000 horsepower at altitude through an exhaust-driven turbo-supercharger of remarkable design. Its structure is robust, its controls simple, and its manufacturing methods standardized across multiple factories. It is not a pilot's airplane, it is an engineer's airplane. Milch raises an eyebrow. You are impressed by American craftsmanship? Newman answers carefully. Not craftsmanship, Herr Feldmarschall. Process. The report that silenced the room. He opens the folder, revealing photographs of the dissected engine, supercharger ducts, and cockpit instruments. This machine was not built for elegance or agility. It was built to last. Every part is over-engineered, yet every part fits perfectly, even though they come from different factories. We confirmed interchangeable precision, a level of uniformity achieved only through large-scale industrial automation. He pauses, then adds, their tolerances are so fine that the engine crankcase seals without gaskets. The machining is exact. Their metallurgy is advanced. And they build these by the thousand. A murmur ripples through the room. One general scoffs. Exaggerations. We Germans have superior engineers. Newman replies steadily, we do, sir. But they have more machines to do the work of 10 engineers. They've industrialized what we still perform by hand. He gestures to a chart comparing power plants. Our 2800 double wasp, 2000 horsepower, altitude efficiency to 9000 m, 500-hour service life. BMW 801D, 1700 horsepower, altitude efficiency to 6000 m, 150-hour service life. Daimler-Benz DB605, 1475 horsepower, liquid-cooled, easily damaged under fire. The contrast is devastating. The political reaction. Milch narrows his eyes. What are you implying, Oberleutnant? That Germany cannot match them. Newman hesitates. I'm implying that we cannot sustain the match. Every Thunderbolt is built faster than we can repair a Focke-Wulf. Their production outpaces our innovation. A younger officer scoffs. But they waste resources, thick armor, redundant systems, oversized engines. They build monsters. Newman nods. Yes, monsters that fly home. Monsters that return the next day with replacements already en route. A long silence follows. Then Milch says coldly, so, you believe the war is lost because of one overweight American plane? Newman's answer is quiet but firm. No, Herr Feldmarschall. Because of what that plane represents? An America that can afford to make 10 mistakes and still succeed on the 11th. The words hang heavy in the air. The engineer's warning. He opens his final report and reads aloud. The Thunderbolt is a triumph not of design, but of production. Its strength lies not in the ingenuity of one man, but in the cooperation of 1,000. If the United States maintains this rate of output, no technological innovation can offset the industrial gap. Their factories are our true enemy. He sets the folder down. No one speaks for a long moment. The ticking of the wall clock becomes the only sound. Finally, a senior planner mutters, then we must do as Speer says, move production underground, simplify, standardize. Another replies bitterly, simplify with what? Our cities burn every night. Our railways are rubble. Newman looks at them exhausted. He knows they understand, but he also knows that none of them can admit it aloud. The Reich survives on illusions now. Secret weapons, last stands, miracle fuels. Reality has become treason. Aftermath. When the meeting adjourns, Milch calls Newman aside. You've done your duty, he says flatly. Your report will be filed. Newman salutes, but as he turns to leave, Milch adds, one more thing. Keep your conclusions to yourself. Morale is worth more than accuracy. Newman nods once. Jaw. But as he walks out into the cold Berlin rain, he knows morale won't save them from mathematics. That night, as Allied bombers thunder above the clouds, he writes one final line in his personal notebook. We thought victory lay in invention. But invention means nothing when the enemy can build it faster, cheaper, and stronger. The Thunderbolt is not a fighter. It is a factory with wings. Outside, the air raid sirens wail, echoing through the dark city. Somewhere over Germany, another formation of Thunderbolts escorts bombers through flak and fire, high above the clouds where the air is thin, and where industrial might, not ideology, now rules the sky. December 1943, Western Europe. The war in the air has changed. From the gray coastlines of Brittany to the Ruhr Valley's blackened factories, a new thunder fills the sky. It isn't the shriek of Stukas or the whine of Messerschmitts. It's the steady, earth-shaking roar of the P-47 Thunderbolt. Thousands of them now sweep across the continent in waves, their four-bladed props flashing like scythes in the sun. The Jug, as American pilots call it, has become the hammer of daylight war. What the engineers at Reckland studied in silence, the soldiers below now feel as a daily storm. Above the clouds. At 25,000 feet, the contrails of B-17s stretch white against the blue. Beside them, P-47s fly escort in tight formation. Their bellies gleam with bomb racks, their wings heavy with 8.50 caliber Browning machine guns. Each gun fires 13 rounds a second. A full second's burst delivers more lead than a German anti-aircraft cannon. Inside the cockpit of one Jug, Lieutenant Robert Bob Johnson adjusts his oxygen mask. His unit, the 56th Fighter Group, has been patrolling since dawn. Below, the haze of the Rhineland flickers with fires. Johnson's squadron has fought its way across France, through flak bursts, chasing Focke-Wulfs and Messerschmitts at altitudes the Luftwaffe once ruled. The Thunderbolt's turbo-supercharged R-2800 engine hums evenly. At 30,000 feet it still produces full power. Johnson glances at his gauges, oil temperature steady, manifold pressure solid. He knows his German counterparts can't hold this altitude long. The P-47 was built for this sky, the high, thin air where horsepower decides who lives. Through his canopy he spots movement, silver specks above the cloud line. Bandits, 11 o'clock high. His wingman confirms. A formation of FW-190s dives in, sunlight flashing off their radial noses. But they are too late. Johnson throttles up. The Jug doesn't climb, it surges. The 2,000 horsepower engine drags 8 tons of metal upward as if defying gravity itself. The Germans can't follow. Their engines gasp for air where the American supercharger still breathes freely. The first burst tears through an FW-190's fuselage. Smoke and debris spiral downward. Another peels away, too steep, too fast, its pilot fighting for control as the heavier Jug dives behind him. The Germans had once mocked the Thunderbolt as a flying milk bottle. Now they call it something else, Der Sturmbach des Himmels, the battering ram of the skies. The Jug's second life, ground attack. By mid-1944, the P-47's role evolves. The Luftwaffe, battered and short of fuel, rarely rises to fight. But on the ground, German armor still prowls the roads of France, Italy, and the Low Countries. The Thunderbolt becomes the solution, fighter bomber, tank buster, executioner of logistics. From Normandy's beaches to the Ardennes forests, the Jug screams down in near vertical dives. Rockets streak from its wings, the new HVR Holy Moses, each carrying the punch of a 105mm shell. 500-pound bombs tumble away, smashing trains, convoys, and bridges. Its 8 machine guns rake columns of vehicles, shredding metal and flesh alike. The Germans call them Jabos, fighter bombers, and dread their howl. Achtung, Thunderbolts, becomes a cry of panic across Europe. But what truly terrifies them is the Jug's invincibility. P-47s return riddled with holes, cylinders shot through, wings torn by flak. Yet they make it home. Pilots say it's the only plane that feels alive when it's half dead. One American ace jokes, if your Jug still has wings, it'll get you home. If it doesn't, it'll roll home. The numbers that crush the Reich. By 1945, the scale of American output has become staggering. Over 15,000 P-47s roll out of Republic Aviation's plants. Every one carries the same engine, the same reliability, the same brute power. They escort bombers, strafe trains, and blast bridges across half a continent. Thunderbolts fly for the US, Britain, France, Brazil, and even Mexico. The Allies now fight with a unified sky, one engine, one doctrine, one relentless rhythm of production. In contrast, Germany's Air Force dwindles. Fewer aircraft, fewer pilots, dwindling fuel. Even new marvels like the Me-262 jet cannot reverse the tide. They arrive too late, too few, with too little gasoline to matter. On April 8, 1945, as Allied forces cross the Rhine, P-47s roar overhead in endless formations. Each one is a testament to an idea the engineers at Rechlin had already understood. The war was no longer about superiority, it was about sustainability. Newman's realization. At the same hour, back at Rechlin, Oberleutnant Newman stands outside the hangar. The snow has melted. The once captured Thunderbolt, its Luftwaffe markings fading, now sits silent, stripped for parts. Its engine, the Double Wasp, has been shipped to Berlin for study, though there's little left to learn. He watches a column of smoke rise in the distance. Another Allied raid somewhere west of Magdeburg. The sound of distant thunder echoes across the sky. Only this time it's not weather. It's the industrial heart of America, reaching across an ocean and into Europe's final days. He remembers what he told Milch weeks before. They build faster than we can repair. They endure longer than we can resist. Now he knows it wasn't a theory. It was prophecy. That night, as the airfield falls quiet, Newman writes his final entry. The Thunderbolt is more than a machine. It is the embodiment of a system that never tires, never runs short, never doubts. Our nation believed genius could outpace industry. But genius needs metal, and metal belongs to those who can melt mountains. The roar of that radial engine, that was the sound of history turning. He closes the notebook as sirens begin to wail again in the distance. Somewhere high above, the deep, even rhythm of thunderbolts passes overhead, a chorus of engines that no longer need to be understood, only endured. May 1945. The war is over. Berlin lies in ruins. Smoke drifts over the shattered Reich Chancellery, and the silence that follows the thunder of artillery feels almost unnatural. Across Europe, airfields once filled with fire and fury now sit quiet, hangars empty, runways cracked, windsocks tattered. At Rechlin, the test center that once buzzed with the energy of innovation and pride, the gates hang open. Allied soldiers wander through, photographing wrecks of prototypes that never made it to combat. And there, still sitting under a sheet of dust in Hangar 12, is what remains of the captured P-47 Thunderbolt. Its metal skin is scarred from testing, its propeller blades nicked and dull, but its presence still dominates the room as if the air itself remembers its defiance. A British officer pulls the tarp away and whistles. "Blimey," he mutters. "Still in one piece." His American counterpart smiles. They usually are. The war's unspoken truth. The men who had once dissected the Thunderbolt, the German engineers, the metallurgists, the pilots, are gone. Some fled west to surrender to the Americans, others east to the Soviets. A few, like Oberleutnant Karl Neumann, disappeared in the chaos of Germany's collapse. His final reports on the P-47 never reached the high command. They were lost in bomb train cars or burned during retreats. But his words, scribbled into a private notebook, would later be found among the ruins of Rechlin. The Thunderbolt was not the product of one genius. It was the product of a civilization that believed in progress through cooperation. Where we built masterpieces, they built momentum. Those words would later circulate among Allied engineers studying captured German technology, an eerie reversal of roles. For the first time, it was German work being examined for lessons, not the other way around. The Jug's triumph. After the war, the P-47 Thunderbolt remains in service across the world. In France, Brazil, and Italy, it becomes a symbol of liberation, a machine that had smashed rail lines, destroyed tanks, and swept Luftwaffe fighters from the skies. In the Pacific, it earns another reputation, as a guardian of ground troops, a destroyer of Japanese convoys, a shield for bombers over the Philippines and New Guinea. By war's end, the Jug has flown 746,000 combat sorties, dropped 132,000 tons of bombs, and fired millions of rounds. Its pilots claim over 3,700 aerial victories. And despite its size and weight, the Thunderbolt earned something rarer than statistics: affection. Veterans will later say it had a personality, stubborn, steady, and loyal. A pilot once summed it up best: if you treat a P-47 right, it'll bring you home no matter what you did to it. When peace returns, many P-47s are melted down for aluminum, their engines repurposed, their frames scrapped. Yet the legend of the Jug lives on, not only in museums but in the lessons it left behind. It changed how the world thought about engineering. Before the Thunderbolt, nations sought brilliance through design. After the Thunderbolt, they sought strength through standardization. The R-2800 engine's descendants would power the next generation of aircraft, from the F-6F Hellcat to the A-26 Invader, and its spirit would echo decades later in the A-10 Thunderbolt II, the modern tank buster that inherited its name and its philosophy: survive, strike hard, and come home. Even in the jet age, engineers studying production systems would cite the Thunderbolt as an early symbol of scalable perfection, the moment when industry itself became a weapon. The ghost of Rechlin. In 1947, Allied investigators returning to Rechlin uncovered a final note in Neumann's handwriting on the back of an unfinished report. Read: "We built machines to prove our brilliance. They built machines to prove their endurance. In the end, the sky belonged to the ones who never ran out of steel." That simple sentence, scrawled in pencil, would later appear in post-war engineering journals. Anonymous, stripped of context, but hauntingly true. The Thunderbolt's echo. Today, the surviving Jugs fly at airshows, massive, loud, and unapologetically heavy. When their engines start, people still stop to listen. The sound is not just nostalgia, it is history alive, a thunder that once decided the fate of continents. Each radio cough, each propeller spin, tells the story of a machine that embodied an idea greater than flight, that industrial unity can be as decisive as courage. As one historian later wrote, the P-47 didn't win the war alone, but it proved that America could build victory faster than anyone could destroy it. And somewhere, if the ghosts of Rechlin still wander their empty hangars, They would remember the day they lifted that silver monster from its truck, laughed at its size, and realized too late that they were staring at the future. If you found this story meaningful, if it reminded you that history is more than battles, it's about the people and the machines that shaped our world, consider subscribing to Shadows of Valor. Every week, we bring forgotten stories of courage, invention, and consequence back to life. Stay with us. The past still has more to say.